Welcome back to Half the Battle. I'm your host, as always, Daniel Levy, your co-host, Shaq. We're going to be talking UFC Austin, Cowboy Cerrone versus Yancy Medeiros. And Shaq, it's going down this Sunday in Austin, Texas, man.
Yeah, man, this is a solid event. I mean, this arguably was better than last week's event, and on paper at least. And I'm excited to see these fights. You know, crossroads fight in the main event, 3-fight win streak versus 3-fight losing streak, and let's see who gets it done.
No, absolutely. And, normally Shaq's in studio with me, but now you're over the phone. But the show must go on, as you know, Shaq. And speaking of last week, much respect to Jake Matthews. He went out there, rose to the occasion, and beat Li Jingliang. And there's nothing else to say but hats off to Jake Matthews on that performance.
Yeah, Jake looked the best he ever has, and props to him, and good luck to him moving forward.
Absolutely. And also one other thing I wanted to say, I said, who the fuck is Tyson Pedro? I think now I know who the fuck Tyson Pedro is, Shaq. And, maybe I got to put that kind of pressure on these guys before their pay-per-view debuts, and maybe they'll all go out there and perform like he did in that first round.
Yeah, I mean, it was a solid performance. Really wasn't that hairy at all, and I guess he is one of the top prospects at 205.
Yeah, he proved himself, and that's all there is to say about that. And, man, Yoel, Soldier of God Romero, what is it about the third-round knockout with this guy? He already had the record for most third-round knockouts in UFC history. He just extended that streak a little further. And not only that, man, my boy T-City has a run for his money in the third-round finish department.
Yeah, man, Yoel is definitely the second-best middleweight out there. Had a very close fight with Rob that first time. And, I think he probably put an ender on that career of Luke Rockhold, man. That's how many KO losses now? 4. So Luke's had a great career, former champ, but it's Yoel's time now, and we'll see Yoel in that rematch and see how he does.
4 too many is what it is for Mr. Rockhold. But yeah, props to Yoel. Took care of biz. And now we got to talk about UFC Austin. We're going to do the whole card start to finish. And man, first fight of the night. Oskar Piechota, he's minus 280. The comeback on Tim Williams is plus 240. Now, man, we got two prospects here. One of them is, more of a vet than a prospect, but still, this is officially Tim Williams' UFC debut. He's taking on Oskar Piechota. What do you think, man?
Yeah, man, Piechota had a solid debut. I mean, that was a pretty flawless debut. Had some nice back taking against Jonathan Wilson, and he's got a nice little point fighting approach. Very calm. He's not going to, take any stupid, unmeasured risk out there. And like I said, that BJJ is on point. He's got a nice left hook as well. But the thing is, Tim Williams, a very big middleweight. I mean, his tie-ups and his clinch game is very strong. It's definitely imposing out there. And I feel like Oskar, in my opinion, I feel like he's a smaller middleweight. I do think Piechota has the edge in every aspect across the board, but Williams is one of these guys that, he's paid his dues on the local scene. He's not fazed by much. And Piechota's undefeated. We always know that these undefeated guys, they have a tendency to show up flat every now and then, and this could be the time. Tim Williams, that vet that if you show up flat, he's going to out-vet you. He's going to put on a vet performance. But I think Piechota, like I said, is the better fighter. I think he wins a close decision here. I actually think this is going to be closer than the line indicates, but I got Piechota.
Look, I like Oskar Piechota as well, and how am I not going to pick someone named Oskar? I mean, my dog's name is Oskar, for fuck's sake, man. But, this is a guy in Oskar Piechota who beat Vinny Magalhães on the jiu-jitsu scene, 3-0 on points. One does not simply beat Vinny Magalhães on the jiu-jitsu scene. That's exactly what this kid did. He's a Robert Drysdale black belt, but with Tim Williams, we're dealing with a very strong individual. And, if your wrestling defense ain't on point, Tim Williams is that guy that will grind you out. Super strong for the weight class. He's massive. But I think somewhere along the way, after a very close round, he's going to start to gas out. And I think Oskar is going to get a dominant position on him. I think he's going to tap out Tim Williams. So I'm going to go with Oskar Piechota here for the win. Now, next up in the lightweight division, we got Alex Morono. Actually, the welterweight division, Shaq. We got Alex Morono. He's minus 275. The comeback on Josh Burkman is plus 235. Now, they call Josh Burkman the People's Warrior, and I mean, as far as I'm concerned, he should keep that name, man, because this dude banged Ariane, so he's winning at life. The question here is he going to win inside the UFC's octagon, Shaq?
Man, Josh Burkman, I feel like he's one of these guys that's, just too tough for his own good. He doesn't know when to call it quits. And, I mean, the guy, heart is not an issue for the guy. I think he's got a massive heart. but I just don't think he can take it as well as he used to. Even in his prime in the UFC, he used to struggle to get wins as he was cut from the UFC his first stint. I mean, his second UFC stint ain't going too hot either. You know, his only wins against KJ Noons, and, you know, KJ Noons broke his hand early in the fight, and KJ Noons simply didn't want it. But
KJ Noons retired after that fight.
Exactly. And, you know, Burkman, he's one of these guys, he's a super crafty vet. We know he knows how to fight. It's just that his body, his brain, the CTE, all the shots he's been taking lately, all the years training, all the wars in the gym, it's catching up with him. And, I mean, we've been seeing in his last two fights. The Preserves fight, he retired after that fight. He said he's done. He left his gloves in the octagon. And, I mean, Dober put the icing on the cake and, you know, launched him across the into the fifth row. So, I mean, you know, I think Burkman's still got, you know, a decent body lock, but I don't think he can do it for 3 rounds. And, you know, when I talk about Alex Morono, yeah, he is coming off 2 losses, even though his last fight against Keitaro, I thought it was super close. But I love his style, man. And, you know, a lot of people are thinking that he has to knock Burkman out to win this fight, and that's not the case at all. I think he can go 3 rounds and win a decision as well by out-voluming him. I think he's got the way better cardio. And I think Burkman, he's just going to be looking to, you know, land big haymakers off the breaks and, you know, desperation shots against the fence. And I think this is Morono's fight to get back on track. You know, after these last 2 L's, I feel like he's learned a lot. And, you know, he's not fighting Keitaro and Nico Price anymore. I think this is the perfect fight for him. I think Burkman's going to have, you know, cardio for about 2-3 minutes, and then Morono's going to run away with this.
I agree with you, man. You know, I think that, I know for a fact, Burkman is 1-10 in his last 11 UFC appearances, Shaq. I mean, if that doesn't tell the story, I don't know what will. But the bottom line here is that Alex Morono, he's a super tough guy to fight. You know, you listen to Nico Price talk about their matchup, and Nico Price was like, man, the kid is super tough to time because, you know, he'll feint 3 times for every 1 time that he actually decides to go in there and attack. And you actually saw similar qualities when Josh Burkman went in there and fought Drew Dober. Now, I know Drew Dober's a southpaw and Morono's orthodox, but they have very similar movement, and that movement threw off Josh Burkman because, look, as you know, speed's the first thing to go. Josh Burkman's 38 years old, man, so he doesn't react as fast as he used to. And with all the feints that Morono's throwing at him, I think he's going to be very confused. I personally think Morono's going to go out there and get his first kill in the UFC. I think this is going to be a knockout. However, if it does go the 3-round distance, I think Morono's going to win a decision because the kid's volume is on point. You saw that 2nd and 3rd round against James Muntasri, man. You start to slow down on a kid like Alex Morono, he's going to tee off on you, and he's had nothing but stiff competition since he joined the UFC. And, you know, as far as I'm concerned, this is his first softball. And, you know, I hate to talk shit about a guy like Burkman who's been in the UFC for this many years, but, you know, this is a cold, hard business, man. It can be cruel, it can be ruthless, but it is never personal. And the facts are, he's 1-10 his last 11 UFC fights. I think he's about to be 1-12. I'm going with Alex Morono here. I think he gets back on track and gets a big win over Josh Burkman in Texas. And next up in the featherweight division, we got Brandon Davis. He's -190. The comeback on Steven Peterson is +165. Now, we saw Steven Peterson on Dana White Tuesday Night Contender. He went out there against Benito Lopez. I personally thought he won that fight, but now he's moving up to 145 pounds. And Shaq, we've seen with a lot of these guys, when they move up in weight, they perform better. But Brandon Davis, this is his second chance. As we know, he lost a very controversial split, unanimous decision to Kyle Bochniak, which you don't go out there and win a decision against Kyle Bochniak, as you know, my friend. So what are you thinking for this matchup?
Yeah, man, you know, Steven Peterson, he's like one of these junkyard dogs. You know, he doesn't look very athletic. He's on the slower side. He gets hit a lot, but he's got that workman approach, and he just likes to take his damage, and he likes to dish it out even better. And like you said, he arguably did beat Benito Lopez on that Tuesday Night Contender Series at 135. I've heard some interviews where he says that the cut to 135 pretty much takes everything out of him, and that he's, you know, surprised that he did so well at 135 throughout his career. But at 145, he's only lost 1 fight in his career, and he says he feels like that's the weight class for him in the UFC. And, I mean, he's super accomplished on the local scene. I mean, the guy's the former legacy champion. He went 5 rounds with Leandro Higo. You know, he beat Manny Vasquez. He beat Matt Hobar. So, I mean, the guy, he's paid his dues on the local scene. And Brandon Davis, you know, he's got that slick striking style, even though he likes to take a lot of unnecessary punches. He kind of reminds me of like a Zaleski style on the feet. And, you know, he already had that that feeling of walking to the cage in a main event for a prelim on FS1. So I mean, I feel like he's going to be a lot more comfortable here. So I am going to go with Brandon Davis. But I think this could be a lot closer, man. I feel like a lot of people are on Davis. And, you know, I see why. I think he is, you know, the better striker. But Peterson's one of these guys that, you know, I'm sure Benito Lopez thought he was going to knock Steven Peterson out in the first round. But between you and me, there was one guy that wanted out of that fight.
And it wasn't Steven Peterson, I'll tell you that right now. And, you know, man, just to add to what you said, look, I think Steven Peterson's going to come out here and have a successful UFC featherweight debut because, you know, the weight cuts really were getting too extreme for him. And I think that's why he kind of did start to gas out in that Benito fight. You know, then again, he pushes a seriously high pace, so that could be the reason why as well. And Brandon Davis, like you said, man, he's got a very aggressive striking style. Many believe he won that fight against Bochniak, but you already know the deal when you go to decision with a guy like Bochniak. Ask my boy Enrique Barzola, you know what I'm saying? So I think that in this specific spot, you know, if Steven Peterson can avoid getting knocked out, I think he can grind this out, man. So I'm going to actually go with the upset here. I think that Steven Peterson starts off slow, which he is known for, but eventually I think Brandon's going to start to slow down, and that's where Steven Peterson takes over with his very grindy style. I think he's going to grind out a decision here. Female bantamweight division. Lucie Pudilova, she's -170. The comeback on Sarah Moras is +150. Now, Shaq, they actually got this one right, my man.
Yeah, you know, before the lines came out, you know, I was looking at Pudilova as a potential underdog, and I'm just gonna say I think she wins this fight, and I think she wins it, you know, comfortably. Man, I feel like Moras is a limited fighter in her approach. I feel like she comes out looking to swing big bombs early, and I feel like those big bombs will be countered with a straight jab to the nose. And I feel like once that happens, and I don't feel like Moras's offensive takedown game is a threat. I've seen Pudilova stuff against Lena Landsberg, who has better takedowns, in my opinion. And I just think this is Pudilova's fight for the taking. We know that Moras has a very good guard, very sneaky arm bars, and I feel like that's her only chance at winning this fight. I feel like that's the only way she can win by any of her fights is by fluke armbar or, you know, her opponent gassing out and her getting that back like she almost did against Andrade. I feel like her skill set across the board is super under par, in my opinion. I think Pudilova's got a lot of potential. I mean, like we said, that nice jab, you know, she kind of does get stunned early by some shots, but she keeps her composure, and she has a nice, solid point fighting game. And another thing by Moras, I've heard her talk about how she wants to move to 145. The weight cuts is getting real tough for her. So I like Pudilova all day in this matchup. I think she keeps her distance. I think maybe a little early it could be hairy, but second and third round, I think she keeps her distance and pops back that head of Sarah Moras for a decision win.
Man, I was pleasantly surprised with Lucie Pudilova when we went back and watched the tape on her, man. She's actually pretty impressive. You know, she reminds me of a young Joanna Jędrzejczyk. Just go back and watch, and you'll see exactly what I'm talking about. You know, if you just look at her record on paper, you know, you see 1-1 in the UFC. But between you and me, that fight against Lena Landsberg, that was an absolutely disgusting robbery. I mean, one fighter had both their eyes shut closed, and the other one was unmarked. And the one with both their eyes shut closed,
Lena,
like
when your opponent admits that she lost, you know what I'm saying? So that's how you know it was disgusting.
I mean, when the opponent that had both their eyes shut closed is rushed to the hospital, and that's the winner. That's all I got to say about that fight, man, because Lucie Pudilova clearly won that fight. And then her next one, she took care of biz there as well, man. She handed the first L to the girl that just beat Justine Kish. So Lucie Pudilova is no slouch, and you go back, you watch some of her sparring footage, and she's a mean girl, okay? She's a mean lady. She will go out there, and I bet you she's knocked out dudes in the practice room before. And look, with Sarah Moras, you know, if you play around in this girl's guard, there's a chance she's going to tap you out. But if you keep this fight standing, you're going to pick this girl apart all day, man, because Sarah Moras, all she's got is, you know, you talk about a puncher's chance. She's got, you know, a submitter's chance, but it's not even if she gets on top of you. It's if she's on bottom, you know, if she's able to pull guard, go for an armbar, because I'll tell you this right now, Shaq, her offensive takedown attempts ain't going to work here. You know, Lucie Pudilova is the kind of fighter that if you get, you know, if you pull guard on her, because we did see on the regional scene that, she fought a fighter very similar to Sarah Moras. And that fighter similar to Sarah Moras put Lucie Pudilova in an armbar. So it's almost like we fought, you know, a lesser version of this already in our regional scene days. And Lucie Pudilova passed the test. She didn't fuck around on the mat. She waved the girl up, you know, to get up to the feet and fight her, you know. Fight her like a, I was going to say fight her like a man, but fight her like a woman. You know what I'm saying, Shaq? So look, man. I think in this spot, I think my girl Lucie Pudilova is going to take care of biz. I think she's going to pick apart Sarah Moras and potentially get her out of there, but most likely a unanimous decision. So I'm going with the favorite, Lucie Pudilova, and I think she's a bright prospect that you got to look out for in that division. Flyweight division, we got Joby Sanchez. He's minus 135. The comeback on Roberto Sanchez is plus 115. Now, there's one thing I can guarantee in this fight, Shaq. Sanchez is getting the win, my man.
Yeah, for sure, man. Sanchez is going to get the job done. But as far as with Sanchez, you know, Roberto Sanchez in his debut against Bopo Morales, I mean, that was kind of alarming, wasn't it? I mean, he took him down early. And, you know, I know his jiu-jitsu credentials. He's a Draculino black belt. And, you know, he's solid on top. But then the second Bopo Joe worked back up to his feet, the face he made, and then the punch right after that, he went down. It was very alarming. I almost feel like he quit the second he realized he couldn't hold him down. And, you know, I've seen that kid fight on the local scene in LFA, and he is super hell-bent on staying on top because his jiu-jitsu is that good. Now with Joby Sanchez, I feel like the kid's paid his dues. He's definitely the more experienced guy in the spot. You know, we remember him back in the day when he fought Wilson Hayes, and he had Wilson doing the chicken dance across the cage in his debut, and then he won a split against Tateki, and then he took a canvas snap from Gian Herrera. But, you know, these things happen when they're a young fighter. And, I mean, a lot of young guys would have packed it in. They would have just fell off the deep end. But my boy Joby went back to the local scene, fixed some mistakes, and he got 2 solid wins over Manny Vasquez, you know, who beat Ricardo Ramos. And he beat JP Baez, who trains at Team Alpha Male. So he did his job. Joby's one of these solid point fighters there. You know, his fights, they're always going to be somewhat close. You know what I'm saying? It's most likely not going to be a landslide victory, but he knows what he has to do to win. He's super knowledgeable on the points, training out of Jackson Wink, and I think he's going to win on points here. I think the first round it will be kind of hairy. I think they'll be tied up for most of the round. But when Joby stuffs that, I think second and third, I think he'll land the more effective shots. And, you know, just stay what me and you like to call pretty and cute and, you know, impress the judges and win a nice little 29-28 the same way he was winning on the Contender Series.
Yeah, look, I mean, if this fight hits the mat in the first round, all Joby has to do is survive and get back up to his feet. Because if you get back up to the feet after the initial takedown attempt against Roberto Sanchez, the kid's going to fold up. I mean, you saw the look in his eye when Bopo Joe got up that first time, and Roberto didn't want to be there anymore. And these are the kind of things that, you know, fighters need to take advantage of in the UFC. They watch something on tape, they see that, look, this guy is this guy's a front runner, you better take advantage of it. And like you said, Joby's paid his dues, man. He already had a stint in the UFC. He went back to the local scene, fixed his mistakes, then went to Dana White Tuesday Night Contender Series, and he didn't get the call up on his first try, Shaq. He had to come back 2 times, win both times against some very tough competition. You know, a kid in Manny Vasquez who finished Ricardo Ramos, and I think Joby proved that he's ready to get back to the UFC. I actually think he should be a wider favorite in this spot. I'm going to go with Joby Sanchez here, and, you know, I'm going to say decision, but Shaq, don't be surprised if he hands Roberto Sanchez his second, you know, stoppage loss inside the UFC's octagon, because what we saw from Roberto in Mexico, that's not what you want to see from a flyweight prospect. So I'm going to go with Joby Sanchez here inside the distance. Welterweight division, we got Geoff Neal, he's minus 210, and the comeback on Brian Camozzi is plus 175. Now, shout out to my boy Brian Camozzi, because you know, even if he loses this fight and gets cut, he's got a very good job at State Farm. So, you know, the kid's got 1 foot out the door, but I'll tell you what, he's got some nice Muay Thai technique. The question is that Muay Thai technique enough to take out a guy like Geoff Neal, who's a little powerhouse?
Yeah, man. You know, this opened, you know, minus 165 and 5 dimes, and got steamed to minus 210. And, you know, I feel rightfully so. You know, I completely get it. Everyone's expecting Geoff Neal to come out here and touch Camozzi's, you know, chin with that left hand. And we know that Camozzi, at least so far in his 2 UFC fights, just hasn't reacted well to the shots. Like you said, he's got solid technique. I think, he can strike for sure. We saw him in that pocket trading with Pre. The kid can strike. He's got good technique. It's just that mentally, does he really want this? I've been hearing interviews. The guy just seems a little bit uninterested. Like you said, he is an insurance salesman. Maybe he really doesn't want this. I just think that in this fight, it just comes down to a desire thing. I think Neal's on the up, and Camozzi does he really need this? You know what I'm saying? I feel like, Neal, from what I'm hearing from him, I feel like he thinks the same way. I think Neal thinks he's going to come out here and get a first-round knockout. Now, the thing is, in Neal's past, he has been finished in the third round. He's tapped out and he's been knocked out against a guy named Kevin Holland, who is the real deal. He's got a super hard style to deal with. And the fact that Neal already took his L's on the local scene is a good thing in this spot, in my opinion. But I think the power is just going to be the difference here and the confidence. I think Neal just wants it more, plain and simple. And I think he's going to get it. I think first round he's going to touch him up, and I think he's going to get him out of here. Now, if it goes past the first round, all those people that bet it, are you 100% sure that Neal can go the full three? I wasn't sure just because I've never seen him do it. So, that was a concern of mine. And just because, he's got a lot of muscles, in the third round he might get a little tired, just like how he did against Kevin Holland. So I still think Neal's going to get a first-round knockout, though. I think we've seen the last of the Camozzi bros inside the octagon.
Look, I'm going to go with Geoff Neal as well, man. But, man, that fight with Kevin Holland was a serious fight. And if you haven't seen it, go and watch it on YouTube. Kevin Holland, this is a 6'3" prospect. He's a super athletic guy. He's kind of a freak, you know what I'm saying, in that cage, man. And I think that Kevin Holland will be in the UFC later on this year. So I don't see any shame in taking that kind of L. And I also don't think that Brian Camozzi is capable of having that kind of war with Geoff Neal like Kevin Holland did. That being said, man, Brian Camozzi has already touched down inside the octagon. Even though he lost both of his fights, he knows what the bright lights are like. Now, you can say that Geoff Neal does as well because he was on Dana White Tuesday Night Contender. But as you know, Shaq, it's different when you're fighting in front of the crowd, versus just that UFC gym. But that being said, man, I just think that Geoff Neal is a better athlete. I think he's mentally stronger. I think he wants this more. I think he's too powerful, too dynamic. I think he's going to get Brian Camozzi out of there. We've seen that Brian Camozzi has a bit of a weak body and a bit of weak chin, man. Look, Brian Camozzi has good offensive Muay Thai technique. But as you know, man, this ain't lion fight. This ain't glory. You know what I'm saying? This is the UFC. And even when I talk about, his Muay Thai technique, it ain't on lion fight level. It ain't on glory level or anything like that. So, I brought up that example. It ain't there at all.
Yeah.
And
100%.
That being said, man, I think Geoff Neal's going to get him out of there. I think it's going to be a right hook to the liver. Excuse me. It's going to be a left hook to the liver. And I think he's going to put down Brian Camozzi, before the third round. But we'll see what happens, man, because like you said, we've seen Geoff Neal gas in the past, but, everyone's got to take that first L, and I think those were very valuable lessons for him. The Kevin Holland fight, I can completely excuse because Kevin Holland's a serious fighter. The other one, though, maybe we can say it was his third pro fight. We can excuse him in that respect, but that dude he lost to ain't been doing shit, Shaq. So, that's why I am a little hesitant, to take this number here, a high number on the UFC debut. But that being said, I do think the newcomer is gonna take this fight. Next up in the lightweight division, we got Jared Flash Gordon, who's minus 255, and the comeback on Carlos Diego Ferreira is plus 215. Now, Shaq, Diego Ferreira is plus 215. They must have forgot.
They must have forgot that his only losses are to Beneil Dariush and Dustin Poirier. And, like I was saying about Steven Peterson earlier, this is his teammate, and I feel like the same thing. These guys are super deceptive if you watch them on tape. When you watch them on tape, you think, oh, this guy's slow. This guy, he got no head movement. I'm going to outstrike him easily. And then when you get in there with him, just ask my boy OAM if he still remembers Carlos Diego. You know what I'm saying? And he'll tell you that he sure does because that was the last time we saw Carlos, and he straight up broke that kid, man. The questions coming into this fight is USADA going to be a factor? Like, in the past we've told you that, when Mateus pops, it's not going to be a factor. And, when Vito Canetti pops, it's going to be a factor. I'm halfway. I don't know if it's going to be a factor, and I don't know because, he's right in that middle age. He's about 32, 33. He's either at the end of his prime or he's either, starting the tail end. So I really don't know. As far as Jared Gordon's skills go, I'm not going to lie. I don't think that he's, a future top 15 guy or, this guy that a lot of people are making him out to seem. I think he's just a beneficiary of the two opponents that he's had. I think, this is a flashy striker that clearly, if you stay on him, he'll break. And we already know that Hakram was done. Hakram's not in the UFC anymore. We know that if you stay on Hakram, he'll quit as well. I mean, the history, those guys' history is laid out there. And, I think, Gordon, he has this reputation of drowning guys, and he might drown Carlos because we don't know the type of shape Carlos is going to be in. But I think Jared Gordon gasses out as well. I just think he was fighting Hakram, who is on a different state of, being gassed. I think Hakram is just completely done. So I'm not going to, overhype that performance against Hakram. I'm just not. So I think Carlos actually is the better fighter in every aspect in the game when, at the time of where he left. I mean, the striking was looking the best it ever has. We already know his game on the mat. I mean, we already know that, even though Jared Gordon's super accomplished on the mat as well. We already know my boy Carlos has the edge there. So I think Carlos is a super live underdog. I think that the first UFC L for Jared Gordon could be coming up very soon. And this is the perfect scenario, a fairly unknown guy we haven't seen in a while. But make no mistake about it, when Carlos left the game 2 years ago, he was at the top of his game. He was a top 20, 25 guy. And like I said, he's only lost to Dustin and Beneil, and they were respectable outs. He fought Dustin like a man, and Beneil is just a better fighter. So I'm going to go with Carlos in this one. I think the line's super off. I think the line should be honestly a pick 'em, or, Carlos may be a little slight fave just because of the layoff. But people seem to be confident in Gordon, man.
Yeah, and, look, Jared Gordon, much respect. He's had two great performances inside the UFC, but for him to be an over 2.5 to 1 favorite here over Diego Ferreira is insane. Look, I get it. Diego's coming off that USADA suspension, but like you were talking about, man, there's guys like Brian Ortega and Mateus Nicolau who come back looking perfect, and then there's guys like Guido Canetti and George Sullivan who come back and get finished. And, Diego Ferreira's kind of in the middle there because prior to his suspension, he was really good, man. He just beat OAM, and you watch that fight, and OAM loves to take dudes down. Well, when OAM took down Carlos Diego in that third round, Diego had a beautiful sweep on OAM and then dominated him on the mat. And I don't see why, this brown belt in Jared Gordon, if he tries to take down the third-degree black belt in Diego Ferreira, I don't see why he won't be swept as well and possibly submitted. It's just that coming off the 2-year suspension, there might be a little bit of ring rust there because there were also points in that OAM fight where Diego did start to slow down a bit and he was able to use his technique to win the fight. And not saying that he can't do that here, but the reason that Jared's the favorite is because if Diego starts to slow down, Jared's the last guy you want to slow down against, man. I mean, he really pushes that pace. And don't get me wrong, Jared doesn't have the best gas tank either. You saw that in the Hakran fight, and maybe it really was a victim of circumstance. Maybe it really was because his first two UFC opponents basically were not UFC caliber guys. And everyone that Diego has been fighting, at least his last three, are all top 25 guys. So Diego's been in there with better competition. I think Diego's got better technique. It's just, is he going to be suffering from ring rust? I know that he's not looking soft at all. You go to this guy's Instagram and he's ripped out of his mind. So, it might as well have been a tainted supplement. You know what I'm saying, Shaq? But it comes down to how's he going to perform under the bright lights after a more than 2-year layoff. That's what we don't know. That's why it's confusing. But that being said, I have to pick the better fighter here. I'm going to go with Diego Ferreira for the upset here. I think Jared Gordon takes his first UFC loss. Now, also in the lightweight division, we got Sage Northcutt. He's minus 305, and the comeback on Thibault Gouti is plus 253. Now, I know everyone's expecting us to shit all over Sage Northcutt here, but, man, I'm an honest guy, and I'll tell you what. Sage Northcutt, he took that year off after the Mickey Gall fight, and you know what? He came back looking way better than ever, Shaq. I was actually impressed with Sage Northcutt's last fight.
Yeah, I was too, man. As of right now, he seems like a completely different guy training with Faber. Prior to the Quinones fight, I didn't think it was going to matter, but I mean, Faber, just to say, Faber got the kid in check, man. Faber had him looking the best he ever has. You remember his striking against Enrique Marin and Barberena and Mickey Gall. I mean, he got dropped by Mickey Gall. I mean, it was laughable in my opinion. And then we see a guy that I've never seen before, a guy that's eating the punches inside the pocket, trading, answering back with 3 and 4 strikes, blasting through Mitchell Quinones with the takedowns. I mean, it was an incredible performance in my opinion for a guy with the history that he had. You know, it was basically like I had to, you know, watching tape for this fight is basically like I had to completely forget about his past because, I mean, why would I take that into stock? I mean, I was a guy that was training, you know, while he was still in school, plus his training situation, you know, with his dad. You know, I really don't know. But, I mean, now I know who he's training with. I know that he's training with Josh Emmett every day. I know he's training with Elkins and Chad Mendez and Rick Glenn. And we already knew the hole in his game was getting up from bottom. And, I mean, imagine training with those four. I mean, I bet they hold him down in practice all the time and, you know, embarrass him. That's going to make him tougher. And, I mean, I think it did make him tougher. I think his boxing got way better. I think, you know, he's still a little susceptible to right hands. But, I mean, I think the kid's young. I think he's embracing that, man. I think he's just going to walk through that. But, you know, Thibault Gouti does have a solid right hand. And, you know, he does actually come to fight, man. You know, he actually does bite down and get in people's faces. Just that, can he take it? Is he going to get discouraged? And, you know, history says that, yeah, he will, you know. You know, the Holbrook win, you know, congrats. You knocked out Andrew Holbrook. Who hasn't knocked out Andrew Holbrook? You know what I'm saying? Jake Matthews, I guess. But, you know, I just think this is Sage's fight to take, man. I think he's the better fighter in every aspect. I think Thibault Gouti will come and fight hard for, you know, I think this might be hairy for a round, maybe like half a round. I think Gouti's going to come out and try to, you know, punk out the kid. I think he's going to try to get Sage to revert back to those old tendencies. Maybe go for a couple takedowns. But I think Sage is just going to be too physical. I think he's going to overwhelm him when they collide, man. I think he's just going to blast double him whenever he wants to bail himself out. And I think he can beat him on the feet, man. So I think Sage is going to – I'm actually going to say second round finish. I think he's just going to be too much. And I'm actually – interested to see how far he keeps improving, man, because the improvements he made from the Mickey Gall fight to the Michel Canones fight was just drastic, man.
Yeah, he got so much better, and, you know, at the same time, he wasn't put in any bad positions, and I truly believe that, you know, Carlos Diego gets him on the mat, and, you know, all those old problems could reappear, but that being said, sure. he ain't in there with Carlos Diego. He's in there with, you know, it's a tune-up fight again. You know, Michel Quinones and Thibault Gouti, much respect to both of them. They fight in the UFC, but, you know, these are jobbers being brought in to take L's. You know what I'm saying, man? And
I just feel like the opponents that he's going to be getting for the next year or two, I just feel like he's going to, if he keeps improving at this rate, it's going to be easy money for him.
Yeah, no, 100%. I think this will be easy money as well. I think that Thibault Gouti, even though he had a win in his last UFC fight, he's 1-3 in the UFC, 1-4 if you include tough, and I think he's going to run into something hard, man, because, look, even though Sage looked much improved and we still don't know what happens if a fight hits the mat with him again, I'll tell you this, man, his counter-striking game in that last fight was on point, his physicality, and not only that, like you mentioned, most importantly, when he got hit in the pocket, you know, he didn't get dropped. He didn't start to back off. You know, he didn't need the ref to get him up like in that Cody Pfister fight. There was none of that bullshit here. And in fact, his offensive takedowns, man, he hit Michel Quinones with a couple beautiful blast doubles. I think his timing is on point right now. I think he's going to get a really nice win here over Thibault Gouti. And, you know, we can talk about fading Sage in the future when he fights a real top lightweight. But right now, you know, they kind of realize what the deal is. The kid's only 21 years old. Let's just give him a couple tomato cans, pad that record up, and I think he's going to have a nice performance here against Thibault Gouti. Welterweight division. We got Thiago, the Pitbull Alves. He's -165, and the comeback on the newcomer, Curtis Millender, is +145. And I'll tell you what, this kid, Curtis Millender, is no slouch. He actually has a win over that prospect we were talking about, Kevin Holland, the guy that beat Jeffrey Neal. And now Curtis has this... you know what I'm saying? This UFC debut against the vet Thiago. Who do you think is going to get this one?
You know, personally, I feel like this could be a potential good debut for Curtis Millender in terms of the circumstances, the scenario. You know, Alves, I mean, the Mike Perry fight, you know, the sketchiness he pulled there, you know, he pulls out due to a weather condition. All I know is that him and Christoph was on the same flight, and Christoph showed up to fight. That's all I know. And then, you know, his next fight against Zach Cummings, Jack Cummings pulls out on him the day of the fight or the day before the fight or whatever it was. So, I mean, his last 2 fights, I mean, it's like the worst way to have it scratched. And, now he's fighting a guy where it's like, what's the point? Just the point is to just get a paycheck. You know what I'm saying? Like, he absolutely gains nothing for beating Curtis Millender. And, I mean, imagine going from fighting Mike Perry, a super hype guy, a guy they want to promote, then to fighting Cummings, who, is super underrated and, a guy that's fringe top 20, top 25. And then now you're fighting Curtis Millender, who no one knows. It's a super letdown spot, in my opinion, man, especially for a guy like Alves, who we know his history. Anytime he has that, solid performance where everyone thinks he's back and whatnot, he generally drops the ball the fight after that. The thing with Curtis Millender, I think he's got super athletic tools. I think he can get his kicks up high super fast. And, I mean, if one of those lands, he might put Thiago out. And, I mean, he's known for doing that on the local scene. The thing is, the rest of his game is takedown defense. Just Thiago's a vet. He might outclass him if this thing hits the later rounds. He's way more experienced. That's what I'm worried about. But I know that Millender, if he lands one of those head kicks, it could be over at any time. And I wouldn't be shocked if it happened. I still do think Thiago's the better fighter. I think Thiago's going to scrape out a close decision here, man. I think Millender's going to give him trouble early. I think Millender might even drop him in the first round. But I think Thiago, outclass him in the late rounds, get a few takedowns, and squeak out a decision.
Yeah, that's the part of Millender's game that I still have questions about is, his takedown defense, his submission defense, his get-up game, all those things. Because on the feet, I'll tell you what, the kid reminds me of Chidi Njokuani. You mess with Curtis Millender on the feet, you might be...
Oh, yeah, on the feet.
Yeah, you mess with Curtis Millender on the feet, you might be in big trouble, but you take this guy down. I've seen him tap that mat very quick before, Shaq, against Brendan Ward, and he was piecing up Brendan Ward prior to that, but it just goes to show you that, if a vet gets in there with him and takes him down and grabs that neck, he might be tapping that mat for another time. And Thiago Alves absolutely is a vet. It's just we don't know how much this vet has left. And I know, like you already mentioned, he's coming off another great performance over Patrick Cote, but we know what happens every time Thiago Alves has that great performance. He always comes back and loses his next fight. I mean, you remember when he fought John Howard, and we were talking about, Thiago's back, this and that, then he loses a bunch of fights. And, now he came back a couple years later, and he beat Patrick Cote. Now it's time to take another L, man. So, since you remember how Thiago Alves was on that fucking massive win streak, beat Matt Hughes, beat Josh Koscheck, got the title fight with GSP. Well, since his title fight with GSP, he's 5-5. So he's literally a 500 fighter since his title shot with GSP. So it's literally a hot and cold fighter, 50-50. You have no idea what to expect. Flip a coin. I'm going to go with the newcomer, Curtis Millender here. I think it's a new era. I think he's too athletic, too dynamic. I think he's actually going to outstrike the Muay Thai kickboxer and win a decision. But if this hits the mat, you know what I'm saying? Hit up that live betting. You know what I'm saying, Shaq? Because
exactly.
This kid will tap that mat very quick. But that being said, he's got so many offensive tools that it cannot be ignored. And against an aging competitor like Thiago, a guy who, he used to miss weight at 170. Then nowadays he's trying to make 155. You know what I'm saying, Shaq? So times have changed.
And not to mention he's got one foot out the door. He's looking in transition of being a coach. We've seen him in, my boy Dustin's corner. He's looking to bounce out into that coaching game as well. So we never know what we're going to see from the guy.
And I wish him all the best in the future. Now, next up, the featured bout in the lightweight division. We got James the Texecutioner Vick. He's minus 230, and the comeback on Francisco Masuranduba Trinaldo is plus 190. Now, what a hell of a matchup between two top 15 lightweight, Shaq.
Yeah, man. I mean, we already know that Trinaldo will accept a fight with anyone. We know Trinaldo's not scared of anyone, and we know Trinaldo's going to come to fight, James Vick, top prospect at 155 right now, finally getting some love in those rankings. And, I mean, we already know what's up with James Vick. We know he's super rangy. We know that if you stay at distance with him, you're probably going to get picked off, you know what I'm saying, unless you can get on the inside successfully. Now, to get inside, you got to take a lot of steps to get inside, and not too many people have been successful taking their steps without getting caught. Trinaldo, he is like, he really, on paper, doesn't really have that much KO power. But, I mean, when we watch him, we see the force of that left hand. And, you know, this is basically, I wouldn't say a redo of the Benny fight, but, you know, in some cases it kind of is, just so we can go ahead and clear the southpaw myth, you know. But I think Trinaldo's super underrated as far as the line. Unfortunately, in my opinion, it's a dog or pass situation. I don't think, you know, I understand 100% why Vick's line minus 230. He's looking the best he ever has, and I actually think he is the real deal. I think he will win this fight. But, you know, when I'm looking to bet play a minus 230 straight, I feel like it should be not a complete mismatch, but I feel like it should be damn near close, and I honestly don't feel like this is a complete mismatch. I think it's going to be a fight. I think Vick's going to get his hand raised in the end. I think, you know, it could be a knockout, a decision most likely. But when it's minus 230, you know, I'm looking at a Razak Al Hassan versus Sabah, you know, a Nico Price versus Sullivan, a guy that's, you know, doesn't belong. You know what I'm saying? I feel like the line's a little bit off. I'm actually surprised people did not take that plus 190 on Trinaldo. It should be super enticing. You know, I thought it would be, but I'm going to go with James Vick. I think he stays on track and he moves into that top 10 in the division. I got the utmost respect for Trinaldo, but he is, you know, creeping up on 40 years old. But Trinaldo seems like he's one of these guys that he is what he is. You know what I'm saying? He's not going to come with anything new. It's the same guy. He's tough. He's going to move forward. He's going to look to throw that left kick to the body, the overhand left, the left side shots. And let's see if he can stay in Vick's space and get the win. But I got James Vick.
You know, much respect to Francisco Trinaldo because he was the only guy, you know, with the balls to step up and take this fight with James Vick. You know, many were called and many turned down that fight, by the way, Shaq. So, you know, much respect to Masu Randuba, a true warrior that'll fight anyone, anytime, any place. My hat's off to him. But that being said, James Vick is the rightful favorite. There's a reason this line opened minus 245. It's not an error. It's not because of the hype. It's because James Vick is the real deal. And I think in this fight, he's going to prove that not only is he a top 10 guy, Shaq, he's a future top 5 guy, maybe even a potential title challenger because, you know, people like to act like he has a weakness against southpaws. Well, you know, first of all, I understand the last southpaw he fought beat him, and not only beat him, but knocked him out. But look, that was first UFC L time. It is what it is. You know, no one likes to talk about the Nick Hine fight, who was also a southpaw. And I know Nick Hine dropped Vick in that fight, but let's not forget Vick beat the shit out of Nick Hine. So I don't really think he's got a weakness against southpaws. I just think on that night when he fought Beneil Dariush, Benny was simply the better man. Benny caught him with a King's MMA kick counter. You know, when Vick threw the high kick, Benny countered with an overhand left, which is something that not a lot of people have in their arsenal. To, you know, a counter off a high kick. You don't see that very often. You only see that from guys from King's MMA. I mean, you saw that fight between Benny and Rashid, and he was countering everything that the counter striker Rashid threw. That just shows you the high level Beneil Dariush is on. I mean, you saw Beneil Dariush go out there and outstrike Edson Barboza for the first round and a half of their fight. So, you know, I think taking your first UFC L to Beneil Dariush is admirable and respectable. And what's he done since then? Because with some guys, you know, they got that hype, then they take that first L, they never come back the same. I mean, you know, I'm not going to name any names. I know, you know, a couple of the guys I'm talking about, you know, they get this big hype, then they lose 4 in a row. You know what I'm saying, Shaq? You know exactly who I'm talking about. But Vick ain't one of those guys, man. I think Vick simply had to take his first L. And when a world champion faces defeat, you know, they put their head down, they grind, and they come back better. And that's exactly what Vick did because his next 3 fights, man, that's the best version of James Vick I have ever seen in my life. You know, to stop Abel Trujillo the way he did, to knock out a vicious knockout artist in Polo Reyes, and then he goes in there against Joe Duffy. Not only does he catch Joe Duffy, Shaq, he embarrassed Joe Duffy for that entire fight. You know, I mean, if you look at Joe Duffy's face between the first and second round, you could see Joe Duffy's like, what the fuck do I have to do to this guy? And also, watch that huge overhand right that Joe Duffy swung at James Vick. Watch it in slow-mo on Fight Pass. Click that slow motion feature, and you can see him whiff on it. And he took a bunch of steps to get forward and close that distance, and he threw as hard as he could, and he still missed it. It's got to be super discouraging. And look, Trinaldo, I love watching this guy fight. He's got incredible footwork. I love the way he moves his feet. I love the way he closes the distance. Very powerful left hand. He got Chad Lepre out of there, but I think in this spot, man, you know, Francisco's got a history of gassing around the second round of every fight, man, and he can get away with it against guys like Yancy. He can get away with it against guys like Felder, but you're not going to get away with it against a cardio machine like James Vick. I think that there's a lot of moments in Trinaldo's fights where he's able to kind of take a break, take a rest, and I'm not discrediting him at all, because both of these guys have a similar stat. They've both won 8 of their last 9 UFC fights. That means that if you faded these guys in their last 9 UFC fights, you'd be 1-8, Shaq. But if you bet on them in their last 9 UFC fights, you'd be 8-1. So, both of these guys are money machines. But that being said, man, I think that James Vick is on a different level than Masuranduba Trinaldo. I think he's going to pick him apart with that jab. When it's time to time that flying knee, he's going to time that flying knee. And I think eventually, when that left hand isn't landing for Trinaldo, he's going to start to go to his wrestling. And yes, Vick has been taken down in the past, but one thing we know about Vick is his get-up game is on point. And, when you try to hold down a 6'3" man, he starts getting up, you're going to start huffing and puffing, and that's when you're going to start to see Vick really tee off, mixing it up to the body, mixing in the spins, the flying knees, the high kicks. I think Vick's going to go out here and finish Masuranduba Trinaldo, so I understand why he's the favorite. I got him here. James Vick is going to get another huge win in Texas by finish. Co-main event of the evening. We got Marcin Tybura. He's minus 145, and the comeback on Derrick, the Black Beast Lewis, is plus 125. Now, these two were initially scheduled to fight last year, and Derrick Lewis was actually a big favorite. Now he's the underdog in this spot, Shaq. So, do you agree with the lines makers now, or do you agree with them back then?
Maybe I agreed with them back then, and I agree with them now. I'll tell you that much, because Derrick Lewis, he's been doing some alarming things as well. The Marcin fight, I'm not going to say he quit, a heavyweight with the style of Derrick Lewis, if they don't have anything left, they don't have anything left. So I'm not going to say he quit, but even though between you and me, he did quit. But let's just say, he was out of gas, and then, he gets scheduled to fight for Mauricio. And then, you're talking, all in the lead up, this and that, and then the day of the fight you pull out. Is that not alarming?
Yes.
Because of a back issue that, was failed to be mentioned, the whole lead up to the fight. But, it is what it is. But it's more so with the improvements that Marcin Tybura has, been making. And before we get started, I don't give a fuck about the Jackson Wink losing streak. That's a myth. Like, so what? Marcin Tybura ain't fucking everyone else on Jackson Wink. So let's go ahead and knock out that myth. I think Marcin made I think he learned a lot in the Fabricio Verdun fight. Fabricio, for one, I got a lot of respect for that guy. The guy is on a different level in terms of the heavyweight division when it comes to fighting, the pace that he put on Marcin. And Marcin dealt with it, man. Even though he did take an ass with him, he got beat up pretty bad. But I felt like he fought well, man. I felt like it's either one of those things where you learn everything from that, and I think he's one of those guys that will, or you completely crash and burn. But I think he's got the perfect style, man. I feel like if he keeps the distance, throws that teeth to his gut. We know Derrick Lewis doesn't like those front kicks to the body. I think if he keeps his distance, makes him a nice little head kick. We saw those head kicks against Verdun. Verdun almost went out for a couple of those, man. I think Tybura just wants it more, man. I think when the going gets tough, I think Lewis will check out. And I feel like he's not, especially with this being a 3-round fight instead of a 5-round fight, I think Marcin can build up an early lead on points and, run away in the last round and win a decision, man. I think he's got this fight. And I think, Black Beast hits super hard. I feel like if Tybura's not careful, he could get cracked. The thing is, man, I just think that Black Beast, I think he's a front runner. I feel like, even though he has come back in the past, I feel like that's been against Victor Pesta and Shamil, guys that have histories of quitting or, checking out in fights. I don't think Tybura is going to do that. I think even though he gassed out against Arlovsky and gave everyone a heart attack, I think he learned a lesson. And I think he learned an even bigger lesson in the Verdun fight, and I think he comes back better and gets a finish.
Yeah, don't remind me about that heart attack I had when I max bet Tybura against Arlovsky, all right, Shaq? Because that was at like 5 a.m. in Singapore, and Let's just say I didn't go back to sleep after that. But, you know, in this spot, man, I think that Derrick Lewis is actually going to show up here because, look, the fight's in Texas. He is from Texas. His last result against Mark Hunt was super embarrassing, and it's got to be even more embarrassing to pull out of your next fight the day of. So I think his back is against the proverbial wall here. I think Derrick Lewis is going to show up. But that being said, Marcin Tybura, it's not often you see a volume striker in the heavyweight division. I mean, I know my boy Shamil Abdurrahimov has that volume style, and he would have beat Derrick Lewis had that been a 3-round fight, 30-27, but he fucked up in that 4th round. So I think Marcin Tybura can go watch that tape and figure out a game plan to come out here and out-volume Derrick Lewis to a decision, mixing the teeps, mixing the jabs, mixing the high kicks, and, potentially stop him with a high kick. There's just one thing here. If Derrick Lewis, hits you on the chin with one of those uppercuts, if Derrick Lewis gets on top of you and starts throwing those big bungalows, I don't care who you are, you're getting knocked the fuck out. So, Marcin Tybura still has to be on top of his game in a fight like this because even though, people like to talk about Derrick Lewis, he's a front runner, cardio issues, this and that, the dude's a super dangerous guy, and the dude also wins a lot more fights than he loses, Shaq. He's a winner in the UFC at the highest level. I remember that post he made, some guy wanted to come to the gym and see what the Black Beast was all about. Then you see the picture of the guy sprawled out on the canvas, you know what I'm saying, looking up at the lights. So you sleep on a guy like Derrick Lewis and you will literally be sleeping. But that being said, I think Marcin Tybura has a game plan. I think he has a strategy. I think he's a smart fighter. I think he's going to come out here and get the biggest win of his UFC career. I'm going to go Marcin Tybura 29-28 on 2 scorecards and 30-27 on the last. Main event of the evening. We got Donald Cowboy Cerrone. He's -150. The comeback on Yancy Medeiros is +130. Now, Shaq, at the beginning of the show, you said this is a fight between someone on a 3-fight winning streak in Yancy Medeiros versus a fighter on a 3-fight losing streak in Donald Cerrone. Now, the guy on the 3-fight losing streak is currently the favorite here. The guy on the 3-fight losing streak was also the favorite in his losses to Darren Till and Jorge Masvidal. You think the trend will continue here where the underdog comes in and upsets, the fan favorite Donald Cerrone?
It's a tough because it could be one of those situations where, you just need to have action against Cowboy at this stage in his career. 3 L's in a row, all by 2 by stoppage, but really 3 stoppages just because he got knocked out twice by Jorge in that fight. And, it's unfortunate what's been happening to him. But my boy Yancy, the thing with Yancy is where I feel like it has the potential to be a trap fight is I feel like Cerrone has a big edge when it comes to just the whole knowledge and the execution of the point fighting game if he tended to, fall back on that strategy in this fight, which would be, a good strategy because why would you brawl Yancy? You know what I'm saying? We know Yancy isn't going to quit. We know that Yancy isn't going to go out. We've seen Dustin and, Master and Duba and Alex Cowboy hit this guy with everything in the kitchen sink and he still won't go down. You know what I'm saying? So it makes no sense to fight him with fire, in my opinion. So I think Cerrone's going to come out here with a little more cautious game, a little more caution in his style. And, when I look at Yancy, when we fade Cerrone, we like guys to do certain things. We like, a guy that will blast our body. We like a guy that'll stay in his face, not give him any space, punk him out. And, Yancy really doesn't have that type of style. Yancy's another guy that likes to get hurt to the body a lot. He's a notoriously slow starter, even though I feel like he's been looking the best he ever has at 170. It's just a super tough fight to call, man. I feel like it's a potential trap fight on both sides, man, because, I know that, Cerrone's a guy that's, he's on the tail end. It's 100%, but at the end of the day, I still feel like he's better than Yancy Medeiros all across the board. It's just a matter of he really just might be completely done. But I'm gonna slide. I'm gonna side with Yancy Medeiros in this one. I just think he's in a better spot, man. I feel like things will be going Cerrone's way early, but I feel like around 2nd and 3rd round, I feel like Yancy will hit him with a shot, and not saying one punch KO, but I feel like that's where things will just start to turn. And I actually see Yancy winning a 5-round decision.
Man, like you said, dude, it's such a tough fight to call because we know in Cerrone's prime, he'd probably win this fight inside the distance. And we also know he's got a lot more tools than Yancy Medeiros does. But, that might not matter here because Cowboy might simply have had enough. And I know he was on that huge win streak at welterweight, prior to his skid, but, things in this game change overnight, and they change rapidly. I mean, you remember Chuck Liddell winning all those fights, and then all of a sudden he's getting knocked out every single fight. And we don't know if Donald Cerrone's on that level yet or not, and there's a chance that he might be. And, I know Yancy took a lot of damage in his last fight against Alex Oliveira, and he takes a lot of damage in a lot of fights, but one thing that he's got going for him, he's so durable, he can take that ass whooping. Something about those Hawaiians, man. Something in the water over there. You can hit those dudes with a baseball bat. They'll laugh at you and keep coming forward. You know what I'm saying? And Yancy absolutely has those qualities. But Cowboy does possess what it takes to put Yancy away. It's just, is he going to be able to pull that trigger, after 3 devastating losses? 2 of them were absolutely devastating, but one of them against Robbie, even though it was a fun war, some people scored it for Cowboy, some scored it for Lawler. We can all agree both guys took a lot of damage in that fight, and at this point in their careers, that's gotta if he was a 92 on the video game, it's gotta at least make him an 89 by now. You know what I'm saying, Shaq? So it's just one of these cases where it's super tough to call. I lean Yancy because he's the younger, fresher guy, but the reason I'm not, running first in line at the window to bet it right now is because I know one little high kick, one little body kick, one little flying knee, one triangle choke, and the fight could be completely over because Donald Cerrone is that good. He hits everyone with that double leg, and so in a matter of skill, I got Cerrone, but in a matter of will, I get Yancy Medeiros. And there's something James Vick always told me. He always said, it's not the skill of the man, it's the will of the man. So with that being said, I'm going to go with Yancy Medeiros for the upset, but I'm kind of reluctant in this pick because I think it's a super close fight, but I'm going to go with Yancy. Now, before we hit up Kyle Marley for the Big Marley Minute, Shaq, we were telling everyone that we were looking forward to this weekend because we had a big max bet on the card. Now, initially, the plan was to have 2 max bets on this card for UFC Austin, and one of them was going to be about a 10-unit play. Unfortunately, one of the fights got canceled, but the good news, Shaq, is we still have a nice max bet on this card here, don't we, my man?
Yeah, man. I got a max bet going this weekend on Sunday, and, I believe it's going to get the job done. And, right now it's all about getting this win and moving on and creating some consistency right now. And, of course, man, we're looking to help out people that are looking to take this seriously 100%. And I think things are going to start looking real good for us.
I do as well, man. It is what it is. Like the great Billy Walters said, I've had losing weeks, I've had losing months, but never a losing year. And I stick by that because I've never had a losing year either. And, that's this year, 2018, is going to be no exception. But that being said, man, this max bet, I'm pretty fucking sure it's going to get the job done.
For sure, man. And, it's not about how you start. It's about how you finish.
That's right. That's right. And you can apply that message to all areas of life if you know what I mean. But that being said, let's hit up Kyle Marley for the Big Marley Minute. And joining us now on the Big Marley Minute is Big Marley himself. Kyle, how's it going?
Great, man. Ready for another card, make some more money.
So, should I ask you how things went last week at the championship?
It wasn't bad. I finished, I think, 8th and 11th, and I think that was good for $5,000. So it's not what I wanted, but I'll take it. It could have been worse.
My boy getting more than Reebok entry-level pay, and it's not that bad, right?
Yeah, right. Still can get better.
Yeah, exactly, and so can they, right? So can they. But, this main event, just as a fan of the sport, how can you not love watching Donald Cerrone and Yancy Medeiros fight? But you're on the show because of DraftKings, man, and they currently got Cerrone 8,400. They got Medeiros 7,800. It kind of reflects where the line's at currently. I know you love Donald Cowboy Cerrone. You think he's going to get back on track here, or do you think the surging Yancy Medeiros is going to continue his win streak?
Yeah, like you said, man, I love Cerrone, so my bias may be getting in the way here, but I am picking Cerrone to win, and I think most people are fading him at this point, so I think I'm going to get him at lower ownership than I usually would. So I think I want to be above the field on Cerrone personally, because not only do I want to root for him, if I can get him at a lower ownership than I usually get a name like Cerrone at, I have to take that. But I don't think it's going to be an easy fight at all. I think he could get knocked out. Yancy's been looking really good. So I'm going to have a few shots on Yancy as well, but the way to go about this fight is stacking in cash. I think they're going to put up a really good score. It's going to be a fun fight. And if you put them both in cash, you got yourself one win right there. Find yourself 3 others, and you should be good.
James Vick is taking on Francisco Trinaldo. I feel like if you pick this fight correctly and you pick the winner of this fight and put him on your DraftKings lineup, it could be part of the optimal lineup because, look, Vick is currently 9,000. He needs to score at least 90 to cover that price from your standards. And I think if he goes out there and finishes a guy like Trinaldo, not only will he get 90 points, he'll get over 100 points. But a guy like Trinaldo, he has been winning a lot of fights by decision, but the way that Vick fights, you're not going to beat Vick by decision. If you're going to beat Vick, you're going to knock him out. So if Trinaldo goes out there and knocks him out, he's definitely going to meet that $70 to $100 price tag. So I think the winner is going to get you a lot of points. I got James Vick. Which way you leaning?
I think the popular play is actually going to be Trinaldo here because, like you said, if it is going to end in a knockout, I think it's more likely going to be Trinaldo if it's a knockout, and he's going to pay off that value pretty well. But the way I see this fight going is a stand-up fight that Vick is going to win, picking them apart, 29, 28, maybe 30, 27. So I don't really see him getting that 100-point upside. But I think Vick gets a win, and maybe he's in between 80 and 90 points. So the problem is, do I want to risk it for a 9,000 price tag? Getting 80 to 90 was what I see as the expected outcome. I'm not sure, but if I find out that he's going to be maybe 10% owned, if nobody's talking about him, I'll take that shot on Vick because I do think Trinaldo will be pretty popular. But at the same time, I can't fade Trinaldo completely because if he gets that first-round knockout and I don't have him, then I'm pretty much done for the night. So I think this is the way to go, both sides on GPP. I'm not exactly sure if I'm going to mess with it in cash or not, but my pick here is Vick in a decision. I just don't know how high he can score.
So Thiago Alves, he's coming back and he's taking on this newcomer, Curtis Millender. Now, currently, you can get Millender as low as 7,600. And we know Thiago Alves, even though he's had a great career, all great careers do come to an end. Now, I'm not 100% convinced that the newcomer is going to come out here and get the upset, but he does have some vicious head kicks, and if he does get this upset, he will cover that salary cap.
Yeah, I think he's going to be another popular one that I'm going to have to fall on as well. It's hard to pick too many underdogs on this card, so I think he's one that has a live shot of winning here. And Alves doesn't really interest me a whole lot, except for that. If he's going to be low-owned, maybe I'll take my shots that way. But I can see why he'd be low-owned because I don't see him going out there and just dominating like an old Alves would and getting some into the first-round finish after a brutal beating. I think it would be more of a decision, maybe even 29-28, where he loses a round and he's not going to put up very many points in that round. So I'm not too interested in this fight unless I'm going to go with the dog.
So I know you remember when Tim Elliott went out there and broke a DraftKings record when he fought against Louis Smolka, and then his very next fight, he scored 0 points. Now, the reason I bring that up is because there's this guy, Jared Gordon, and in both of his first 2 UFC fights, correct me if I'm wrong, Kyle, but he scored over 100 points both times. He absolutely destroyed both of his opponents, but now he's taking on a big step up in competition, and I'm not convinced that he's going to cover that $9,300 salary cap. And honestly, from what I see, Diego Ferreira might be the cheapest fighter on DraftKings right now at 6,900. And this is a dude coming off a win over OAM. He went the distance with Benny Dariush. He stood up and banged like a man against Dustin Poirier. So I'm just gonna tell the fans right now, Diego Ferreira will make some of my lineups, Kyle.
Yeah, man, that's the cheapest guy. I think I can't fault you for that. Before they released salaries, I figured Gordon would be a big part of my lineups because I think he opened at maybe minus 175 or so. So I figured he would be middle of the road favorite and I would get him in at a good price. But now they have him as the highest priced guy. So I'm really rethinking things on this fight. I don't know if I want to pay up at 9,300 when I can get anybody else on this card for cheaper. And if you go the other way, if you put Ferreira in your lineup, then you just have a lot of money to work with other favorites. So that may be the way to go. Especially in cash where you can afford that loss. But the problem is that pace that Gordon puts up, he can easily pay off that 9,300. He could be the highest scoring guy on the card, and if he does that, you're probably going to need him. So I don't know if I can fade him just because of his crazy pace. But I'm definitely rethinking this fight because this might be one to punt on.
Look, Brian Camozzi hasn't been impressive at all in his UFC career, but in order to fade him here, you got to be willing to lay down 8,900 on a newcomer. Are you willing to do that?
I don't think I am. I think Camozzi would probably be my preferred play if I don't fade this fight completely. I'm not too interested in it right now, but I also haven't made too many lineups. So I'm not sure what I'll do yet, but I think I would rather get those guys that are around Neal instead of him. So I think if I'm making one lineup and I have to put one of these guys in it, it would be Camozzi.
Now, you already know how I feel about Alex Morono versus Josh Burkman. I mean, look, much respect to Burkman, really cool guy, but, he's also 1-10 in his last 11 UFC appearances. And honestly, they got him priced more expensive than Diego Ferreira. I was very surprised by that. Now, if Morono comes out here and knocks him out like I think he's going to, he's going to cover that $8,800 price cap. But the thing is, man, I also see a scenario where he goes out there and wins a decision. Now, if that is the case and he goes out there and wins a 3-round decision, he probably won't cover the $8,800, right?
Yeah, I don't see him covering that in a decision. But I think if he wins, it's most likely by a knockout, which he would pay that $8,800 off. But this is my problem because I thought this is where Gordon would be open up as the 8,800 guy and then Burkman being the cheapest guy on the card. So before salaries were released, I thought maybe I would take some shots on Burkman and then I would be fading Morono more as the most expensive guy. But now he is only 8,800 when Gordon is the most expensive at 93. I do think Morono gets the knockout. So now after seeing these salaries, I'm going to be taking some shots on him, and Burkman's just too high priced to really take any shots on at all unless he's going to be super low owned just as a GPP chance, and hopefully he can get takedowns and win a fight. But at that price, I don't think I want to risk that.
Speaking of overpriced, this kid, Oskar Piechota, look, I'm a fan, man, but he's 9,100. This is a kid that beat Vinny Magalhães on the jiu-jitsu scene, and you saw his UFC debut. It was an absolute clinic, but he's taken on a very strong grinder in Tim Williams. So, look, I'm leaning Oscar's way, but, if he doesn't finish this fight, I'm also not convinced he's going to cover that $9,100 salary cap.
Yeah, you said it right there, man. I don't really have anything to add on to it, to tell you the truth. I think this is kind of a fight to fade because he is my pick, but I don't see him really paying off that 9,100 either. And since he's my pick, I don't really want to take too many shots on Williams. So this is probably going to be a fade fight for me.
And last but not least, Sage Northcutt, he's coming back. He's taking on Thibault Gouti. And listen, man, I've talked shit about Sage Northcutt in the past, but you also know I'm an honest man. And I was very impressed by his last performance. Even, put it on the back burner who he was fighting. I still was impressed with his improvements, man. I thought he came a long way since his fight with Mickey Gall. And we know the deal here. They're bringing in the French jobber to come take an L. It's just, is Sage going to cover this $9,200 salary cap?
That is a high salary, but he's for sure my pick to win. I will have zero Gouti on my lineups. I'm going to fade him completely. It's just, can Sage pay off that 9,200? Are you going to go with him over Gordon? Are you going to go with him over the guys that are priced under him? I'm not quite sure yet, but I will not be fading Northcutt. I think he's going to win, and I think he's going to win pretty easily. But what we really need him to do is use his wrestling here for him to pay that off, unless he's going to get that first-round knockout. But I could see him doing both. So, man, if I was making one lineup, I think Northcutt could be on that team.
You remember when Teemu Pacquiao fought Thibault Gouti and he knocked him out and submitted him in under 20 seconds?
Maybe we can get Northcutt to do that here, and then he'll pay that off for sure.
I know, right? So before I let you go, man, any thoughts on this heavyweight fight between Tybura and Lewis?
I like Tybura quite a bit, actually. But, yeah, we should definitely talk about this one because I think for GPPs, you're probably going to need it. They're right there in that middle range of fighters, so they kind of fit well with lineups. My pick is Tybura. I'm not too sold on Lewis. I just don't know if I'm going to fade Lewis completely because if he wins, it's probably going to be by some devastating KO, and he's going to pay off his $7,900. So I don't want to be stuck without him. I think this is a fight to target both sides of, and if I'm making 10 lineups, I probably want at least 6 of them to have this fight, maybe 4 Tybura, 2 Lewis, something along those lines, but you definitely want exposure here.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly what I was telling Shaq. Like, I favor Tybura as well, but, if there's one thing you don't want to sleep on, it's the knockout power of the Black Beast. So, the winner of this fight most likely will score a lot of points. And Kyle, Thanks again, man. That's why you are the DraftKings guy for Half the Battle, man. Always killing it, and I wish you luck this weekend, my man.
Thanks, buddy. You too. Have fun and enjoy the fights.
Yes, sir. The fans can follow you at Big Marley 3. Kyle, any message for them before we talk next week?
Got my head-to-heads posted. Come see me.
And that is why Kyle Marley is the DraftKings guy for Half the Battle. Always killing it. Always giving out that hard-hitting advice. And, man, yeah, if you don't listen to us, you got to listen to him.
For sure, man. Kyle gets the job done, just like me get the job done. And that's why Half the Battle is the #1 MMA podcast out right now.
This is true. Well, now we got to talk about the fight to watch and the fighter to watch. So, Shaq, what is the fight to watch for UFC Austin?
My fight to watch is going to be Diego Ferreira versus Jared Gordon. We know that the style that Jared Gordon has, he likes to walk forward, eat a lot of punches, and put it on his opponents. And I'm interested to see if he can do that to Carlos Diego, who we know shouldn't be underestimated. We know his stand-up is super deceptive, and we know his ground game's on point. So that's my fight to watch.
Yeah, look, my fight to watch, and it's going to be kind of funny to some, is Lucie Pudilova versus Sarah Moras. It's not often you have Sarah Moras in my fight to watch, but the reason why is not because of her. It's because of Lucie Pudilova. I was very impressed with this prospect when I went and watched the tape. And like I said on my breakdown, I think she has the potential to be a Joanna Jędrzejczyk Jr. I mean, she's just a kid right now. She's only 23 years old. And I think she comes out here and marks up the face of Sarah Moras like I think she's going to. I think we might have a new prospect in the 135-pound division. So Lucie Pudilova versus Sarah Moras is my fight to watch. Now, Shaq, who is your fighter to watch for UFC Austin?
My fighter to watch is going to be James Vick, man. I mean, he's got all the hype right now. This would be the perfect spot for him to, just go ahead and submit his name into that top 10 and, get these fights that he's been asking for, these guys that have been turning him down. So if he gets the win here, then he's in big shoes, and I feel like he's going to have a great 2018.
Yeah, I mean, how could James Vick not be your fighter to watch? I mean, the kid, 3 straight finishes in 2017. Now he's looking to kick off 2018 with a bang against a top 15 guy, against a perennial tough out in Francisco Masuranduba Trinaldo. So if he gets this win, he's absolutely going to be one of your fighters to watch. And not just for this event, but for the year. But look, man, my fighter to watch is Yancy Medeiros. He's coming off a 3-fight win streak as well. And now he's taking on the name, the legend, the vet, in Donald Cowboy Cerrone. And it's one of those spots where you get that win over Donald Cerrone, and you know for a fact, Shaq, that changes careers. That propels you to that next level. Donald Cerrone's always been what we like to refer to as a top 5 gatekeeper. If you can't beat Donald Cerrone, you're not getting in that top 5. But you beat him, and, back in the day, that would give you entry to the top 5. But now it's more like a top 10 gatekeeper. And Yancy has a big chance here. He gets this win, and it's going to take his career to that next level. So Yancy is my fighter to watch. Well, Shaq, we did it. It's going down this Sunday. FS1, Austin, Texas. They can follow you at MMA Genius 05. They can follow me at Best Fight Picks. Our Instagram, Best Fight Picks Official. Make sure you subscribe to Half the Battle on iTunes, SoundCloud, YouTube, and Stitcher. Hook up those 5-star reviews on iTunes. Send us a screenshot of that 5-star review you gave us on iTunes, and we'll give you a free bet. Shaq, any message for them before we talk next week?
Man, just thanks for the support. We're going to get the job done this weekend, and thanks for all the support.
Absolutely. Thank you to everyone that's been down with us, no matter what the result is, because you know long-term what the deal is. So until the next time, let's cash these bets.